If you're applying to law school this cycle, here is the reality. There are more 170 plus LSAT scores in the system than there were a year ago. Not slightly more, but meaningfully more. And that changes LSAT scholarship leverage, even if your score itself hasn't changed at all. Let me explain what's actually happening here. Overall applicant volume is up compared to this point last year. And that matters, but it's not the most important part. What matters more is where the growth is concentrated. The biggest increases are in the 165 plus score bands. The 170 plus range is denser. The 175 plus range is even denser than that. There are hundreds more ultra high scores in the applicant pool right now than there were at this same point last cycle. That doesn't mean your score is worse, but it does mean your score may be less rare. And getting scholarship money is all about being rare. Now, of course, nothing in the scoring scale officially changed, but the distribution shifted. Logic games are off the test, making it easier to study. You can narrow your focus on logical reasoning, and any gains you make in your understanding of logical reasoning are doubled across the two sections. Additionally, LSAC has made it easier than ever before to get extra time accommodations. With more time, of course, easier to get more questions right. And there has been a rise in LSAT cheating with the rise of the remote LSAT. The LSAT has been hacked. A lot of undisclosed test forms were circulating. And of course, that has contributed to higher scores as well. LSAC is taking steps to reduce the consequences of the cheating going forward and the incidences of it, but still, there are plenty of folks out there in the applicant pool with higher scores than they might have deserved. So the result of all this is pretty simple. High LSAT scores are more common this cycle than they were recently. And when strong scores become more common, leverage, of course, shifts as a result. Sad to say it, but it's true. Now, getting into law school and getting scholarship money, of course, is not the same thing. Admissions is out always asking, does this applicant help our medians? When they're looking to give out scholarship money, though, they're asking, how much do we need to spend to secure this applicant? When a 172 LSAT score is rare, schools have got to compete for it. But when there are plenty of 172 plus scores, schools don't have to stretch quite as far financially. And so that's where the pressure shows up. Not always in rejections, often in less scholarship money, because scholarship budgets are set in advance. They don't expand automatically just because there are more strong applicants in the pool. And so when high scores increase faster than financial aid budgets, money tightens at the edges. That is the simple and real dynamic. Now, here's another piece that most applicants miss. Pressure at the top doesn't stay at the top. If there are more 175 plus applicants applying to Columbia and NYU, some of them end up at Georgetown. If there are more 171 plus LSAT scores competing at Georgetown, some of them compete at UCLA or Texas. And if there are more 168s in those pools, that pressure continues downward, so the density spreads. All this to say, even if you're not targeting a top 14 law school, you're still affected by the score growth at the top. So this year, the question is not, am I above the median? The better question is, how comfortably above the median am I in a denser, high-scoring market, high-scoring applicant pool? If you are barely above median, your leverage is going to be thinner than it might have been in a softer cycle. The difference between a 168 and a 171 can matter more. The difference between a 171 and a 174 can matter more as well. Not because the schools changed their standards, but because they have more options. Having just 2 to 4 points more in a compressed scholarship environment can translate into significant financial differences. Not always, but often enough that it's worth evaluating strategically. Now, here's where applicants make expensive mistakes. They get a solid score, maybe a 168, maybe a 170. They're above median somewhere, so they feel relief and they stop. But feeling relief and having true leverage for scholarship negotiations are not the same thing. In a year with greater LSAT score density at the top, above median is not automatically strong positioning. Your score has to be evaluated in the context of this application market, not last year's. Now, you might be thinking, should I retake? And the truth is, not everybody should. If you've plateaued, if you're exhausted, or if you're already significantly above your target medians, it's a different story. But if you're only a few points above or at, or maybe even below your practice average, or you're sitting right at the median, or you're a handful of questions away from reaching a higher score band, you might want to retake. If you see clear areas where you could fix your weaknesses, maybe you should retake. And this cycle, given how competitive it is, it may reward marginal improvement even more so than usual. Even taking the LSAT in April might be worthwhile. And I know that April feels late, but strategically, most schools do accept April LSAT scores, and most will reconsider scholarship offers when you give them a higher LSAT score. Even a small separation above the rest can create meaningful leverage. So while high LSAT scores are more common, there are fixed seats for law schools, and scholarship budgets are fixed as well. And so when you have more high scores, the leverage shifts subtly towards the schools unless you create separation, unless you can distinguish yourself. In this environment, a few more points on the LSAT can make a meaningful difference, giving you more leverage. And that will determine how much scholarship money you get, whether you get into better schools. And so before you decide whether you're done for the cycle, make sure you are evaluating your LSAT score relative to this year's distribution, not last year's numbers, because strength is relative and standing out matters more often than ever before. Now, I see a ton of questions here in the chat. Thanks for asking. I'm going to get to as many of those as I can. Just keep dropping them in. By the way, folks, if you're looking for support, if you're looking for help, I'm offering free LSAT tutoring for everybody watching this now and later. The link to book that free LSAT tutoring lesson with me personally is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below this video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and Instagram as well. That is an open offer for everybody watching this now or later. I'm happy to help. I see Golf Charlie's asking, what does it look like for the online LSAT? So the LSAT is online for everybody with rare exceptions, actually. You could take it either remotely from home on your own device, or you could take the LSAT in person at a testing center on their computer. The last opportunities you're going to have to take it remotely, though, are April and June of this year. Starting in August, the LSAT will be in person at a testing center for everybody with rare exceptions. LSAC is making this change due to the revelations of online LSAT cheating. A lot of folks have been cheating on the LSAT, taking it remotely, installing software to allow proxy test takers to take over their computer to take the LSAT for them, or to steal the LSAT exam content to sell to others. And so, given the revelations of this cheating, LSAC is shutting down the remote LSAT starting in August. So if you want to take it remotely, your last chances will be April and June of this year. Starting in August, it'll be in person for everybody with rare exceptions. And I do think that taking the LSAT online, remotely, has made it easier to study, easier to take it, easier to get higher LSAT scores, in part because of the cheating, of course, but also because it's more comfortable to take it from home on your own device, rather than taking it at a testing center where it's an unfamiliar environment, other people around you, understandably so. It's more stressful as a result. And so I can see the benefits of taking it remotely. If you think you'll do better in that setting, take it remotely if you can, while you still can, in April and June. Starting August, of course, it'll be in person for everybody with rare exceptions. Keep in mind, though, that if you do take it remotely, for whatever reason, you might be more likely than others to get a hold on your score for security reasons. LSAC is, of course, very sensitive to the cheating that's gone on, and they want to look at any irregularities before releasing scores. So keep in mind that if you take it remotely, that might make it more likely your score is going to get delayed before you see it ultimately. But if you don't cheat, you'll have nothing to worry about. Ivy League Viper says, I was told the high scores were due to Adderall. Well, I mean, Adderall's been around for decades, right? And people have been aware of it for decades as well. So I'm not sure that there's been a significant rise in the number of people taking the LSAT while on Adderall, but there has been a significant rise in people taking the LSAT with extra time accommodations. So I think more likely that's probably one of the major reasons for the rise in high LSAT scores. I see Taz is asking about the pricing for our online LSAT classes. So we offer personalized custom LSAT programs for every single individual student, depending on your current LSAT score, your goal LSAT score, and your time frame. So in other words, we tailor every coaching program to the individual student. And so if you want to talk through what your LSAT coaching program could be like, you can book a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me personally. That's an open offer for Taz or anyone else watching this. And we could talk through your situation. Our programs have evolved over time. And so the current formulation of the programs is the best ever. I've been doing this for 20 years. We've been iterating and tweaking and improving all along that time. What we found that works best is a killer combination of different types of support. So in any of our programs, you're going to get private one-on-one coaching. You're going to get a custom study plan. You'll get access to live, semi-private small group sessions 4 nights a week, all optional, all recorded, as well as our comprehensive on-demand course as well. But the exact mix of those different types of support will depend on your goal and your time frame. And so if you've been in our programs in the past, years back, it may look different now. The best way to get a current read on what option would be best for you is to book the free LSAT call with me. Again, the link is unpluggedprep.com/start. Happy to meet personally, talk you through your plans. See other questions coming in here. IDK is asking, is it too late to study now for a test in June? Well, we're in February now, so you've got roughly 4 months between now and the June LSAT. That's plenty of time to improve significantly. Of course, the devil's in the details. Where are you currently scoring if you've taken a practice test? What is your goal LSAT score? And how many hours a week can you put into it? To improve from a 120 to a 180 in 4 months might be pretty tough. To go from a 150 to a 170, much more doable though. And so the question is, how much are you willing to put into this and what are the particulars? If you want to talk through the options, talk through the details, book the call with me. Links below the video, links in the chat, links in my bio. But I'm never going to tell you that it's not possible. The question is just, what would it take for you to get there? What are you willing to put in? What kind of support are you going to need? Doing it alone, self-studying with LSAT prep textbooks might not be the most efficient way to do it if you only have 4 months. If you've got a year, maybe it's doable, but you're going to get there faster with more support, all else being equal. I see Manhattan's asking, I got a 169 and secured a full scholarship, but got rejected for a J1 visa. Any advice? So to be frank, I'm not too well versed on the particulars of visas and immigration and student visas and all of that sort of thing. I would talk to law schools about the particulars there in order to get more guidance. Usually I would think that the law schools could perhaps help with navigating the visa situation to get it into the US, given the offer of scholarship. They should be able to help with that. I would talk to law school admissions for that one. Mustafa is asking, how high can I score if I study 8 hours a day for 3 months straight? Well, the truth is that I would never really recommend studying 8 hours a day for 3 months straight. That's really a recipe for burnout. I recommend studying max 5 to 6 hours a day on average, all else being equal, over a relatively longer period of time. Now, you also don't need to compress it quite that much because there is no LSAT 3 months from now. We're speaking now in mid-February. There's no LSAT in May of this year. And I'm assuming that you're not going for the April test, which is only less than 2 months away. If you want to go for the June LSAT, you've actually got nearly 4 months to get there. And so hopefully, if you are aiming for June, you can reduce the severity of your prep a little bit, reduce the number of hours per day, and spread it over a relatively longer period of time. So 5 to 6 hours a day for 4 months will be much more sustainable. We don't want you to burn out. The LSAT is not a test that you cram for. It's a test of skills. It's a test of pattern recognition, and it takes time to build those skills. You also want to make sure that what you're doing is actually effective, right? So are you just drilling questions by type for 8 hours straight? Are you watching course lesson videos or reading textbooks? Are you taking full practice tests? I never recommend doing nothing but full practice tests because it's also a recipe for burnout. I recommend taking maybe 1 or 2 timed exams per week at most, and then allowing plenty of time to review those exams in detail. You don't want to burn through valuable, limited practice material without building that strong foundation first. You also don't want to do nothing but drill questions by type because it's not enough to get the questions right. You got to get them right under test day conditions, considering pacing and time management and endurance. And so the best study schedule is a combination of building the strong foundation, drilling questions by type, doing individual sections to work on your pacing, and then pulling it all together with full-length timed exams. But when you study properly, when you study more efficiently, you don't need to put in as many hours because every hour that you study is actually more effective, which is why one of the biggest things we do for our students at LSAT Unplugged is we create for you a personal study plan in collaboration with your coach, and it evolves over time. In other words, we change it up week by week because we can't say in mid-February what you're going to need in mid-May or mid-June because you will improve in your weak areas. You will discover more nuanced areas to shift focus towards. And so it changes over time as you learn, as you improve. Now I see a question here from Namang asking, hello, I'm an international student going to take the LSAT in 2027. Any tips? So you're taking the LSAT maybe a year or so from now. That is plenty of time, even assuming no prior knowledge, no prior background. Your LSAT studying doesn't need to be different from anybody else's LSAT studying, except for the fact that if you are a non-native English speaker, it might take a bit more time. The LSAT's hard enough for native English speakers. For non-native speakers, it's of course a lot harder because of the difficult, dense wording of the text, the vocabulary. And so if you are in fact a non-native English speaker, do as much reading in English as you possibly can and immerse yourself in English to the greatest extent possible, and maybe study more than you otherwise would have in order to familiarize yourself with the wording of the LSAT, the reading comp passages, for example. Also consider that if you earned your bachelor's or your undergrad degree outside the United States, LSAC will not work on, they will not go by your undergraduate transcript because they don't know how to evaluate your undergraduate transcript or your undergraduate GPA. What they do instead is they decide to look at your LSAT score. In other words, they over-index on your LSAT in particular because they don't want to evaluate your GPA earned outside the US. And so your GPA from undergrad becomes relatively less important and your LSAT score becomes that much more important. So in other words, give the LSAT your all, study hard. If you want my help, feel free to book the free tutoring with me. Happy to help. We customize every program for the individual student based on your goals, your time frame, and how much time that you have per day, per week to study. If you want to talk through it, feel free to book the call with me. Happy to help. I see Braden's asking, with the rise in 170 plus LSAT scores, are there more students scoring better overall? In short, yes. So there are disproportionately more people with high LSAT scores in the applicant pool than there are applicants overall. So there's been disproportionate growth in high scores in particular. And one more thing I didn't mention is that part of the reason for the rise in scores is due to the fact that retaking the LSAT has become more common. And so you have more at-bats and only the highest score on record matters. And so you could have scored both a lower score and then retook it and scored a higher score, and only the highest score on record is what ultimately counts. And so that's another factor to consider as well. Now I see DJ is asking, when I get my score back next week, what's a good gauge to decide to take it again in April or June? Okay, so I'm guessing you took the February LSAT, DJ, of course, I remember our conversation. You get your score back. What were your practice test scores leading up to the February LSAT? And then, do you think you could do better on a retake? Let's say hypothetically, you were studying for the February LSAT, took the February LSAT, and got, say, a 150 on your practice tests. Your official score is also a 150. You might say, I got what I deserved, I'm good. But the thing is, if you retake, through luck alone, you could do a few points better. And if you don't, no big deal. But everyone has a score band or a margin of error of 3.5 points on each end. Meaning if your true aptitude was a 150, one day you take it, you get a 147, Another day you take it, you get a 153 or even a 154, and the LSAT's still considered valid. And so if you got a 150, that was maybe your true hypothetical score. But if you retake and get a 154, your outcomes will be a lot better than they would have been with a 150. In other words, the highest score is the only score that counts, which means for that reason, there is no downside to retaking the LSAT, because if you don't do better, no big deal. If you do better, the higher score is what counts. So it's rare that I'll say not to retake the LSAT because law schools only take into consideration the highest LSAT score on your record. Does that make sense, DJ? I think that you would benefit a lot from considering that retake. April gives you another month and a half, 2 months from now. June gives you nearly 4 months. Plenty of time to improve your score significantly. And I know that you're in the coaching program, and so some additional coaching sessions will do a lot to help you get your score up further. And you've got some good support, you've got some good guidance on your retake preparation there. Now, I had this fun idea that we could do over the course of this week. You know, for those folks who aren't aware, I do these lives every single weekday, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, here on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, wherever you're watching this. And so I thought it might be fun for us to do a little 5-day course, with the idea being that we want to help you get your score up at least 5 points over the next 5 days. And so I wanted to kick it off today, being Monday, with what I call the truth about LSAT score gains and why you've been stuck. And so if you've taken multiple practice LSATs and your score keeps landing in the same narrow band, like low 150s or high 150s, it's not random. That's a system repeating itself. And unless something changes in the system, the score is not going to change either. For those who don't know me, my name is Steve Schwartz. I've been teaching the LSAT since 2005. I've worked with thousands of students, and I can usually diagnose a plateau very quickly, because plateaus follow patterns. Now, here's what I typically see. You're putting in real hours, you're taking practice tests, and you're reviewing, but your review is nothing more than checking the answer, reading the explanation, saying, "Oh, I get it now. How could I have been so dumb?" And then you move on. And that feels productive, but it doesn't actually rewire how you think. Or maybe this sounds more familiar. You finish a section and you're still guessing on 4 questions. You tell yourself, "I just need to get faster." So you push speed, but your accuracy never truly stabilizes. Or your logical reasoning steady, but your reading comp swings wildly and you don't really know why. Those are not problems of intelligence, they're problems of structure. And most students believe improvement comes from volume, doing more sections, putting in more hours, getting more exposure. But the LSAT doesn't reward volume, it rewards precision. If your thinking process stays the same, your score is going to stay the same. Now, here's the part nobody says clearly. If nothing changes, nothing changes. Meaning, you've got to change the variables to change the equation. And once you change the process, your score improvement's going to follow. If you clean up one major leak, like sloppy analysis of assumptions or passive reading comp approach, you can improve by 3 to 5 points relatively quickly. If you fix how you review, 8 to 10 points over a month is very realistic. And longer term than that, you can improve 15, 20 points. We see it happen all the time. And of course, that's not a promise or a guarantee. Your results may vary, but I share this to show you what's possible when you're willing to change your approach, when you're willing to train differently. And so that's what this 5-day challenge is all about. I don't want to bury you in content or bury you in terminology. I want to help you reset your LSAT study approach using the LASER framework. LASER is an acronym that we use for learning, accuracy, sections, exams, and review. Each day, we tighten one constraint. And before we go any further, I want you to check something. Think about your last practice test. Right now, could you answer these 3 questions? Number 1, what was your exact accuracy percentage per section? Number 2, what was the thinking mistake behind your last 3 wrong answers? And number 3, which specific question type cost you the most points? If you can't answer those immediately, that is your bottleneck. having clarity on what you're getting wrong and why. And so here's what we're going to do this week. Day 1, today, what you should stop studying immediately and where your time actually produces return. Day 2, tomorrow, how to eliminate the mistakes that are quietly draining points. Day 3, how to train under real pressure without damaging confidence. Day 4, stamina, because most people lose points in section 3 and don't even realize it. And day 5, how to review so your mistakes become future points instead of repeated ones. So each day, one specific action measuring your progress. And I want to say something clearly here. The LSAT does not click. It becomes controlled, it becomes predictable, it becomes less emotional. That's when scores rise. Now, a quick note, we're offering a free LSAT tutoring lesson for anyone going through this challenge. This is a real diagnostic session where we break down your recent performance and ID the exact constraint holding your score back. And for a lot of students, that one conversation changes everything. Details are below if you want it, totally optional. But if you're serious about improving, it's worth doing. But for now, your job is simple. Show up, do the exercises, measure the results. And once you see that your improvement's mechanical, your mindset's going to shift. And when your mindset shifts, your ceiling shifts. For those just joining, again, I'm offering free LSAT tutoring lessons for everybody watching this now or later. The link to book that free tutoring lesson with me is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok as well. Now, I see DJ's asking here, I know I'm going to retake, just don't know if I should go with April or June. Well, the good news, DJ, is that you don't have to decide now, right? You can see where your scores are as April gets closer. If your practice test average by the final week before the April test is not where you want it to be, you just withdraw, go for June instead. Law schools will never even know that you were registered for April in the first place. It's too hard to decide this early, right? We don't know a month and a half out where you're going to be by April. If you feel pretty sure that you're not going to be there by April and you feel like your schedule is pretty busy the next few months, then maybe you say, I'm just going to go for June. But if you're not sure, don't stress about it. Again, law schools will not know if you don't actually sit for it as long as you withdraw or postpone before you sit for the test itself. I see Azan is asking, I'm having trouble with translating logical reasoning. What are some tips to stop summarizing? Well, I would focus on the conclusion. Always start there. Most questions in logical reasoning are arguments, and every argument has evidence, conclusion, and the gap. The conclusion is the main point. If the author could leave you with only one central main idea, what would that idea be, and why did they say it? What's the claim? What's the evidence backing up? And for what reason might the evidence not guarantee the conclusion? In other words, how is it possible for the evidence to be true, as it is given, of course, yet for the conclusion to not logically follow? You want to read structurally. So when you say that you're summarizing and you're translating, to me that sounds like you might be taking too much of a traditional reading comp approach where you're reading for information and for content, when in reality, you always want to read for structure. How is the author going about making their argument? What is the method of reasoning? So as an exercise, you could go through an entire logical reasoning section and just say, evidence, conclusion for every single argument that you encounter. And you've got dozens and dozens and even hundreds of real LSAT logical reasoning sections that you could study from, plenty of practice material that you could work off of. And so you could take some of those older sections or some of the individual sections in Law Hub or the drill sets and just do this as an exercise with those. That way you're not spoiling more recent material that you might have wanted to save for full practice tests. I see Garrett's asking, what year in college should I start studying? Whenever you're ready, whenever you have the time. Your scores are good for 5 years. You could study as early as sophomore year, or you could wait till junior year. You got plenty of time. No rush. If you're a freshman, I would say focus on undergrad, focus on your GPA. The LSAT's not going anywhere. But if you're a sophomore or a junior, you could study lightly, take it in your junior year, and then you'll have it knocked out and done, and you can enjoy the rest of junior year and senior year relatively stress-free. Izana, glad it was helpful. Feel free to book the call with me if you want to talk through this more. I see Maggie's asking, I took the LSAT twice in 2024, didn't love my score, so ended up not applying. Advice for starting again. The best way to get back into it is just to get back into it. Do some questions. Maybe not do that. Maybe don't do them timed. Maybe don't take full practice tests. We don't want you to feel discouraged or burnt out. So don't over-index on what the results are. It takes a while to dust off the cobwebs. But if you can set a target test date and stick to it, if you want to aim for the LSAT in June or August, you've got several months to get back into this. So just do some questions. Don't even score yourself necessarily. Just focus on accuracy, not timing to begin with. And then you'll get better and better as you get more fresh and more familiar once again. Now, I want to talk a bit about what not to study and what to do instead. The idea here is we want you to stop wasting your time and focus only on what actually earns you points. Now, let me start with something people don't want to admit. If you've taken multiple practice tests, if you've put in dozens of hours, and if you've reviewed explanations and watched videos, yet your score hasn't meaningfully moved, that is a problem of prioritization. On the LSAT, effort without focus feels productive, but produces nothing. The reason that most smart students stall with their LSAT prep is because they sit down to study, open up a section, miss a few questions, and think to themselves, I've got to get better at logical reasoning. So you do some strengthening questions, then a flaw question confuses you, so you switch to flaw questions. But then you remember you've been neglecting reading comp, so you do a passage. Then you feel like you're behind on timing, so you do a timed section. And by the end of the week, you've worked hard, but you haven't improved a single skill deeply enough to change your score. And that is the trap. The LSAT rewards depth, but most students study with breadth. You do not get points for covering more material. You get points for mastering specific, repeatable patterns. The LSAT is predictable at the structural level. Question types repeat, trap answers repeat, logical flaws repeat, and wrong answer language patterns repeat. But you only see the repetition when you slow down and focus narrowly. And so it's all about constraint. Constraint creates mastery. Your first step is to choose your 3 highest leverage question types. The reason I say 3 is because 5 days is enough time to create measurable improvement in 3 areas if you eliminate distraction. Here is how to choose them properly. You want to ask yourself 3 questions. Which question types show up most often? Which ones feel mentally exhausting or unpredictable? And which ones cost me points even when I think I understand them? So you're looking for overlap between high frequency, low confidence, and inconsistent accuracy. That overlap is your leverage zone. So for example, if you're missing 4 necessary assumption questions per test, 3 strengthening questions, 2 flaw questions, that is potentially 9 scalable points. That is a systemic problem, and systemic problems are fixable. Now here is what not to pick. Don't pick your absolute worst type if it barely ever appears. Don't pick something you've never studied just because it's unfamiliar. And don't pick a type you're already strong in just because it feels good. Improvement doesn't come from comfort, but it also doesn't come from chaos. It comes from targeting recurring leakage. Now, step 2, you want to drill one type deeply. Not mixed question sets, not a full section, no bouncing around, just one question type. And the rule here is you are not allowed to review passively. For every single question, before checking the answer, state the conclusion, ID the gap if it's an argument-based, predict what would fix or weaken that gap, and rate your confidence level, high, medium, or low. Then explain why your chosen answer fits the task. Not in vague terms, but in structural terms. For example, instead of saying, this strengthens it, say, this closes the gap between correlation and causation by ruling out an alternate explanation. That is what builds scoring consistency. Then, step 3, you do your post-answer autopsy. After checking the answer, if it was correct, you want to ask, was your reasoning clean, or did you eliminate 4 wrong answers and then guess? If it was wrong, did you misidentify the conclusion? Did you misread a conditional? Did you overlook a quantifier? Did you fall for strong language? Or did you choose something that was necessary but not sufficient? You want to be specific here. If it's a generic reflection, you're not going to see any growth or improvement. If you can make a precise diagnosis, you will experience compounding growth and your score will improve. So let's say, for example, you're drilling necessary assumption. You miss one, you review it, and you realize, I thought this answer strengthened the argument, but it wasn't required. The argument could still function without it. And that insight matters, because now you understand the difference between helpful and required. And that distinction alone could be worth multiple points. Now, the reason this works is because you are practicing precision. You know what they're asking structurally, what kind of answer is required, what kind of trap answer will appear. And then you're building that skill through repetition of one pattern at a time. Now, this might feel slower at first, and that's okay. If you can build your speed based on structural clarity, it's going to compound and you will improve over time. And you might feel slightly uncomfortable focusing on only one question type, and that's fine. The discomfort is a sign of growth. It means you're not escaping into easier material. Now, what you don't want to do this week is you don't want to take a full practice test every day. It's a recipe for burnout. You don't want to switch types mid-session because it feels hard. You don't want to rewatch explanation videos somebody else made instead of analyzing your own reasoning. And you don't want to tell yourself that you kind of get it and then you move on. Mastery is built on friction, so you want to lean into the discomfort. Now, if you genuinely don't know where your leverage is, that's okay. Sometimes you need an outside perspective to see patterns in your data. But even without that, narrowing your focus to 3 recurring weaknesses is already a massive upgrade over scattered studying. And so here is your assignment for today. First, you want to ID your 3 highest leverage question types. Then you want to drill 20 questions of just one type. And afterward, write down the most common trap answer pattern you saw, the most common mistake pattern you made, and 1 structural adjustment you will apply tomorrow. Now, I want you to keep it simple, no multitasking, no overcomplicating, just working within a constraint. Now, remember, you are not trying to become good at the LSAT. You are trying to eliminate predictable point leaks, and that is a different mindset. Small, focused fixes compound faster than broad, unfocused effort. This is all about reclaiming control over your study time. That's day 1. And of course, if you'd like my help engaging in this detailed review and analysis, focusing on your weak areas, crafting a personal plan of attack, for those just joining, I'm offering free LSAT tutoring lessons for everybody watching this, now or later. The link to book that free tutoring lesson with me personally is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok as well. That is an open offer to everybody watching this now or later. I'm happy to help. Now I see some more questions in the chat. Feel free to keep them coming. I see Garrett is asking, do most people work a job after graduating before going to law school? I can't say whether most do, but I can say that some do, some don't, and it doesn't really matter. In other words, I'm not going to say that you should go get a job just because you think it'll help you get into law school, because that'll cost you time. If you have had a job between undergrad and law school, of course, include it on your resume, maybe talk about it in your applications. If you have exposure to the legal field, say working as a paralegal, definitely make that clear in your application. Law schools do like to see that you have some real world exposure to the practice of law, that you're not just going to law school solely based on pop culture depictions of the law. But it's also okay to be a KJD. In other words, someone going directly from undergrad into law school is called a KJD, kindergarten through JD. That's fine too. Wherever you're at, and that's okay. If you need more time to get a higher LSAT score, though, then maybe take a break to study for the LSAT between undergrad and law school. Now, I see the Big Cheese is asking here, what score should I aim for to get into law school? Well, in my view, always aim for a 180. Why would you aim for anything less? Why would you aim not to understand everything? But in terms of what score do you need to get into law school, it's all relative based on the schools you're looking at. Different schools have different requirements. So for example, the top 14 law schools, which are the highest ranked schools in the US News rankings, like Harvard, Yale, Stanford, Columbia, Cornell, NYU, Chicago, and so on, they all have LSAT medians of 170 to 174. And so if you wanted to get into one of those law schools, maybe you would need to have a 175 depending on what your GPA is. Their GPA medians are all roughly a 3.9. So if your GPA is below a 3.9, you're definitely going to want to have above a 175 in order to compensate. If you're aiming for a lower ranked school, maybe you don't need quite as high an LSAT score, but also consider that if you want scholarship money, if you want a full ride, you're also going to want to have an LSAT score above their medians. So if you can name some specific schools you're looking at, we can then look up their 509s and get a sense of what kind of numbers are required, both to get in and then to get scholarship money as well. Now I see Mike is asking how to balance a high burnout job with LSAT prep. Well, if you are in a high burnout job, that's definitely a bit of an uphill battle. So my first question is, are there ways you can reduce your workload to carve out some more time for LSAT prep? In other words, can you reduce the burnout nature of your job, maybe take some fewer hours, and then you'll have more time to study? Maybe that's impossible, but just throwing that out there. Secondly, where can you carve out time that you're not currently using efficiently? So is there time to study for the LSAT before work, after work, during lunch, on the weekend? What are you doing in the evenings after work right now? Can you study during that time? If you're too tired after work, can you adjust your sleep schedule so that you are waking up earlier, going to bed earlier, then you have more time in the morning where you're maybe a bit fresher and you're not fatigued from a long day of work, and you can get in your LSAT prep time before you get tired? Do you have time to study for the LSAT during your commute if you are commuting to work? Are you taking a train or a bus and you can study during that time? Can you listen to my LSAT podcast, for example? For those who aren't aware, I have a podcast, LSAT Unplugged, on Apple, Spotify, and so on. Totally free. And many of these lives are actually later published as podcast episodes there as well. Do you have time on weekends where you could maybe study for the LSAT? Can you wake up early on a Saturday or a Sunday, knock out 4 or 5 hours, then have the rest of the day guilt-free to socialize or do errands or whatever else? A lot of students face this issue. I see Skigs also has the same issue, and you're not alone here, Mike. I mean, that's one reason why we craft personal study plans for all our students, to help them carve out the time to make it a priority, because we want to help you knock it out once and for all, not have to keep pushing it back and back and back because other things keep taking priority. So if you want to talk with me personally, we could discuss it and troubleshoot it together. I see Shenanigans is asking, what is the best timeline to study for the LSAT? How many months before the test should I begin studying? Well, it depends on your goals. If you truly want a 180 or a 170 plus, you want to allow more time than if you'd be happy with a 160 plus. A lot of students will try to knock out the LSAT in just 2 or 3 months, but ideally, you want to give yourself 5 to 6 months to achieve your fullest potential on the LSAT. And yes, you can do it in less time, but for the best scores, the best potential, you want to give yourself more time. And so for students on a shorter time frame, taking it in just a month or two, we take a more intensive boot camp style approach with live coaching 7 days a week. In other words, we're taking our standard 4 to 6 month curriculum and we're compressing it and accelerating it into only 1 or 2 months, If you're taking it in June or August and you've got 4 to 6 months, we'll take more of a slow and steady approach. But more time is typically better, all else being equal, and we craft your personal study plan around the time that you have available. I see EMKRNY saying, thanks for the channel and content. It's been helpful. Awesome. Really glad to hear it's been helping. Feel free to book the tutoring with me if you want to talk through your particulars. Happy to help. Glad you're finding these helpful. I see Mike is asking, new Fed rate will be 50K, yet most schools exceed that. Will the rest be privatized? And so for those who aren't aware, the federal government is eliminating the Grad Plus loans starting this fall. And so you're going to be capped on how much you can borrow. It's going to be a max of $50,000 a year in federal loans for graduate school, yet the cost of attendance is averaging around $84,000. And so there's this gap or shortfall of an average of $34,000. Where are you going to get that money from? It's a really great question, Mike. So some folks will take private loans, of course, not desirable because of the interest rates. Some folks will get money from friends and family or dig into savings, also not ideal. And many folks, of course, just can't afford to do that. So I think that the best way to make up that gap or shortfall in terms of how much you can borrow is by getting discounts on your law school tuition in the form of merit aid scholarships. For those who aren't aware, the sticker price that is listed on law schools' websites for tuition is not actually what most students pay. Most students get some form of scholarship money to discount their law school tuition. And this is not advertised. So I wish law schools would tell you this, but of course it's not in their interest to do so. The way you get discounts on your tuition, the way you get merit scholarships is by applying with numbers that are better than the average student they already have. Law schools are required by the American Bar Association to publish the LSAT and GPA medians of last year's entering class. And that gives you a benchmark or a bar that you want to exceed. So if a given law school's LSAT median is a 170, their GPA median is a 3.8, if you can apply with an LSAT above a 170 and a GPA above a 3.8, you are not only relatively likely to get in, but you are also relatively likely to get scholarship money as well. The better your numbers are relative to their medians, the more likely you are to get in and the more scholarship money you are likely to get. And the crazy thing is, this is all publicly available. It's not going to be on their homepages, of course, but if you Google Harvard Law School 509 or Yale Law School 509, you will see their LSAT and GPA medians. And you'll see this for any given law school, all 200 or so ABA-approved law schools. By the way, Harvard and Yale do not offer merit aid because they don't need to, but pretty much every other law school does. So even schools like Columbia or Cornell or NYU or Chicago or lower ranked schools will even give you more scholarship money. Some will give you full rides. And so you could, with sufficiently high numbers, get a full ride and pay zero in tuition, meaning the elimination of the Grad Plus loans would not even matter to you because you'd be paying zero anyway. You wouldn't have to exceed the loan limits and you might not have to take out loans at all. There are thousands of students every year who get significant scholarship money. Many even get full rides and pay zero for law school. If you have sufficiently high numbers, and this is not typical, but it's possible, if your numbers are high enough, you could not only get a full ride, but you could also get a living stipend from the school, meaning you are getting paid to go to law school, getting money for your housing and food and other living expenses. It's an amazing outcome. The way to get there is through having really high numbers, being a really attractive applicant by being way better than their typical applicant. So you want to have a killer GPA from undergrad, a killer LSAT score. And of course, your GPA is probably pretty fixed by now. You might already be out of undergrad, of course, or finishing up undergrad, but your LSAT score is the biggest factor you still have room to impact to improve your odds of admission. It's kind of crazy, but a single day of 2.5 hours taking the LSAT will weigh more heavily for your chances of not only getting in, but also getting scholarship money than all of undergrad combined. And so give the LSAT the importance it deserves, give it the time it deserves. Don't just wing it, don't take it cold, don't take it without much studying, don't just use a textbook. get a proper course, get some proper support. And if you want my help, I'm offering free LSAT tutoring for everybody watching this now or later. The link to book that free LSAT tutoring lesson with me is unpluggedprep.com/start. Link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok as well. Open offer for everybody watching this now or later. I see Mike is asking, my GPA is a 3.4. Am I cooked even with a 170? So I'll admit that a 3.4 is below average. I hate saying that because a 3.4 is not a bad GPA. It's actually better than my undergrad GPA was. But a 3.4 is relatively lower because of all the rampant grade inflation. Grade inflation's been getting worse and worse over the past couple of decades. Colleges giving out easy A's. And so you're going to want to make up for that with a higher LSAT score. So if you could get a 170, that would do a lot to offset the 3.4 GPA. If you can get a 173 or a 175, even better. Of course, the 3.4 is probably a done deal, it sounds like. So there's not really any point in stressing about it. Just recognize you are where you are. Get the higher LSAT score to offset the lower GPA. I see you're a splitter with real world experience, older applicant who knows what he wants. That's awesome. Okay, so at first I thought you were saying you literally meant Splinter, like from Ninja Turtles, like you're a wise old man who's guiding others. But splitter applicant. Okay, so splitter means high LSAT, low GPA. Totally fine. Law schools love older applicants, and the older you are, the longer it's been since you earned your undergraduate GPA, the less your undergrad GPA is going to matter, and the more your LSAT and work experience will matter. So in other words, they will discount the GPA because you earned it a long time ago. Who you are now is not who you were back then. And so the LSAT will take relatively more importance. It's going to take up a larger slice of the pie than it otherwise would. So don't stress on the GPA. Just say to yourself, okay, well, that's all the more reason for me to shoot for the 173, 175 plus. And I'm also going to highlight my work experience on my resume in my application essays as well. LSAT's going to be the biggest needle mover for you, of course. I see Hello World's asking if we give one-on-one tutoring. Yeah, we do. So we offer private one-on-one coaching, on-demand video courses, small group coaching, personalized custom study plans as well. We customize every program for the individual student, considering your current score, your goal score, and your time frame. If you want to talk through your personal situation, check out the link in my bio. Feel free to book a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me privately, one-on-one. For those just joining, I offer these lives every single weekday, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, here on YouTube, TikTok, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, wherever you're watching this. I'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. If you find these helpful, please spread the word, share it to your socials. The only way this grows is through word of mouth. I don't do any advertising for these lives, and the algorithm doesn't really boost them because they can't run ads during them. So I do appreciate your support, spreading the word. I'll see you all tomorrow. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care. Thanks for joining.